He thought he was invisible, just a curious 17-year-old hiding behind stacked equipment crates at the SEAL training compound in Coronado. For weeks, Danny Martinez had crept past fences and guards, drawn to the brutal rhythm of drills, gunfire, and shouted orders. He wasn't looking for trouble, just answers. Something inside him needed to know what greatness looked like up close. To the recruits, he was a ghost. To Danny, they were legends, men pushing themselves past human limits. He memorized their routines, timed the schedules, and held his breath every time someone came close. But what he didn't know was this: someone had noticed. And that someone wasn't just any soldier. Commander Stevens had been watching him the entire time. A battle-hardened veteran with a sharp eye and a sharper instinct for people. One morning, in front of the entire platoon, the commander's voice cut through the air like a bullet. "You, behind the crates. Step forward." Danny froze. His world collapsed in that instant. Caught. Exposed. He braced for handcuffs, or worse. But what came next wasn't punishment. It was a lifeline. "Son, if you're that determined to be here," the commander said, locking eyes with him, "maybe it's time we gave you something real to do." Because sometimes, the line between outsider and warrior is just one moment of belief. And the greatest leaders don't just train soldiers. They find them, even in the shadows. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we discover that destiny sometimes finds us when we're just trying to watch from the sidelines. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe determination should never be discouraged, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're honored to share these life-changing stories with you. Danny Martinez had been obsessed with Navy SEALs since he was 12 years old. It started with a library book about special operations that his older brother left behind when he went to college. Danny had picked it up out of boredom during a long summer afternoon and found himself completely absorbed in stories of underwater demolition teams, desert reconnaissance missions, and warriors who seemed to operate beyond the limits of normal human capability. What began as casual reading evolved into consuming fascination. Danny devoured every book he could find about special operations, watched countless documentaries, and spent hours researching SEAL history online. He learned about the origins of the teams in World War II, studied famous operations from Vietnam through the global war on terror, and memorized the names of Medal of Honor recipients who'd served in naval special warfare. Living in San Diego meant proximity to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, where basic underwater demolition/SEAL training had been conducted for decades. The base was less than 20 miles from Danny's house in National City, close enough that he'd ridden his bike past the entrance countless times, always wondering what was happening behind those fences, what kind of training created the world's most elite fighters. At 17, Danny was a high school senior with excellent grades, but no clear direction for his future. His parents, Miguel and Carmen Martinez, had immigrated from Guadalajara when Danny was 5 years old. They worked multiple jobs to support their family and had sacrificed everything to give their children opportunities they'd never had themselves. Their dream was for Danny to attend college, earn a degree in engineering or medicine, and build the kind of stable, prosperous life that had been impossible for them in Mexico. But Danny's interest in military service worried his parents deeply. They associated military service with danger, family separation, and uncertain futures. When Danny tried to discuss his fascination with Navy SEALs, his father would change the subject to college applications and scholarship opportunities. His mother would remind him of all the advantages he had in America that shouldn't be risked on military adventures. Danny understood his parents' concerns, but he couldn't shake his obsession with understanding what it took to become a Navy SEAL. His research had taught him about the physical demands, the mental challenges, the statistical reality that most candidates failed to complete the program. If anything, this knowledge made him more determined, not less. The difficulty of SEAL training wasn't a deterrent. It was exactly what fascinated him. The problem was that he couldn't actually see SEAL training in action. The base was secured, public tours weren't available, and all the documentaries he'd watched were either years old or carefully edited for public consumption. Danny wanted to see the real thing, to understand what BUD/S actually looked like when candidates were pushing through the legendary challenges that created Navy SEALs. That's how he'd started sneaking onto the base. It began almost accidentally during a family bike ride along the Silver Strand. Danny had been riding ahead of his parents when he noticed a section of perimeter fence that had been damaged by recent construction work. The opening was small, probably created by contractors moving heavy equipment, and it had been temporarily covered with a loose tarp that wasn't properly secured. Danny's first intrusion lasted maybe 10 minutes. He'd slipped through the opening, spent a few terrifying moments watching candidates run past in the distance, then fled back through the fence convinced he was about to be arrested by military police. But nothing happened. No security alerts, no pursuit, no consequences. Just the rush of having seen actual SEAL candidates training on the same beach where his heroes had earned their tridents. So he'd return the next week. And the week after that. Over 6 weeks, Danny had developed a sophisticated system for observing SEAL training without being detected. He'd learned the base layout from publicly available maps, studied the training schedule from information he found online, and identified security camera positions by careful observation during his visits. His favorite observation post was behind a stack of equipment crates near the obstacle course known as the O course. From there, he could watch candidates struggle through the legendary challenges that tested their physical and mental limits. Rope climbs, log carries, wall traversals, and dozens of other obstacles designed to push men beyond what they thought possible. Danny had seen men quit under pressure, watched others push through pain that would break most people, observed the gradual transformation that occurred when ordinary sailors became potential SEALs. He'd witnessed the moment when exhausted candidates found reserves of strength they didn't know they possessed, and the heartbreaking instant when others simply gave up and rang the brass bell that ended their dreams of joining the teams. But what fascinated Danny most wasn't the physical training. It was the mental aspect, the way candidates either rose to challenges or crumbled under pressure. He began to understand that SEAL training wasn't just about physical conditioning. It was about discovering who you really were when everything comfortable and familiar was stripped away. Danny kept detailed notes of what he observed, partly from genuine interest and partly as preparation for his own future attempt at SEAL training. He documented training methods, candidate responses, instructor techniques, and the countless small details that weren't covered in books or documentaries. His notebook became a treasure trove of insights about human performance under stress, leadership dynamics, and the psychology of elite military training. What Danny didn't realize was that his careful observations hadn't gone unnoticed. Commander Jake Stevens had been running BUD/S training for 3 years, and in that time, he developed an almost supernatural awareness of everything happening in his training area. 22 years as an active SEAL, including multiple combat deployments and leadership positions in some of the world's most dangerous places, had taught him to notice details that others missed, to spot patterns that indicated potential problems or opportunities. Stevens had first noticed unusual activity near the training areas about 6 weeks ago. Security cameras had picked up movement in areas that should have been empty, and several instructors had reported seeing someone who didn't belong in restricted zones. Initially, Stevens had assumed it was a security breach that would be handled by base personnel through normal channels. But when the unauthorized presence continued with clockwork regularity, always appearing during training hours and always in positions that provided good observation of candidate activities, Stevens began paying closer attention. This wasn't random trespassing or casual curiosity. Someone was conducting systematic observation of SEAL training with the dedication of a professional intelligence analyst. Stevens had discreetly reviewed security footage and identified the intruder as a teenage civilian who appeared to be acting alone. The boy wasn't vandalizing property, bothering personnel, or attempting to access classified areas. He was simply watching, taking notes, learning. His behavior suggested genuine interest rather than malicious intent, but the regularity of his appearances and the sophistication of his concealment methods indicated this was more than casual curiosity. For 2 weeks, Stevens had been conducting his own surveillance of the young intruder, trying to understand his motivations and assess any potential security risks. What he observed impressed him. The boy moved with careful discipline, chose observation positions that maximized visibility while minimizing detection risk, and showed the kind of patience and attention to detail that Stevens associated with professional intelligence work. More importantly, the boy's behavior during observations suggested he understood what he was seeing. Stevens had watched him react to training evolutions with the kind of tactical awareness that indicated real comprehension of military procedures. This wasn't just teenage fascination with military hardware or Hollywood-inspired fantasies about special operations. This was genuine analytical interest in understanding how elite warriors were created. Stevens had been planning his intervention for several days when he finally made his move on a Tuesday morning in October. Class 347 was working through surf conditioning exercises while Stevens conducted his regular observation of candidate performance. As usual, the teenage intruder was in his favorite hiding spot behind the equipment crates, completely absorbed in documenting the training evolution. Stevens approached using tactics learned in decades of special operations. He wanted to surprise the boy but not terrify him, to make a point about awareness and security without traumatizing someone who was obviously passionate about military service. The approach took several minutes, moving carefully to avoid detection by both the hidden observer and the candidates conducting training nearby. Danny was so focused on watching candidates struggle through surf training that he didn't notice Stevens approaching from his blind side. The first indication that his hiding spot had been compromised was the shadow that fell across his notebook as he wrote. "Taking notes on our training methods?" Stevens asked in a conversational tone that somehow managed to be both friendly and authoritative. Danny's heart stopped. He looked up to see a man in military uniform standing directly behind him, close enough to read over his shoulder. The nameplate said Stevens, and the rank insignia indicated this was a senior officer. Danny's mind raced through possible responses, from denial to apology to flight, but his voice seemed to have completely abandoned him. Stevens' expression wasn't angry or threatening. He looked curious, maybe even amused by the situation. "Son, you've been watching my candidates for 6 weeks now. Either you're conducting surveillance for a foreign intelligence service, or you're the most determined 17-year-old in San Diego. Which is it?" Danny's voice came out as a croak. "I'm not a spy, sir. I wanted to see what real SEAL training looked like." Stevens nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable explanation. "And what have you learned from your observations?" The question caught Danny completely off guard. He'd expected to be arrested or expelled, not questioned about his conclusions. Stevens seemed genuinely interested in his analysis, which gave Danny enough confidence to provide a serious answer. "Sir, I've learned that most of the books and documentaries don't really show what it's like. They focus on the physical stuff, but it's really about mental toughness. About not quitting when everything hurts and nothing makes sense anymore." Stevens was impressed despite himself. In 2 sentences, Danny had identified the core truth that many adults never understood about special operations training. "What else have you observed?" Danny gained confidence from Stevens' apparent interest in his insights. "The candidates who succeed aren't necessarily the strongest or fastest. They're the ones who help other people, who stay focused on the mission instead of their own discomfort. The ones who quit are usually thinking about themselves instead of their teammates." Stevens looked down at Danny's notebook. "May I see that?" Danny handed over the notebook with trembling hands, knowing that his detailed observations could be interpreted as evidence of more serious security violations. Stevens flipped through pages of meticulous documentation, training schedules, candidate performance analysis, instructor techniques, and thoughtful questions about military tactics and leadership principles. "This is impressive work," Stevens said finally. "Detailed, accurate, insightful. You've identified patterns that some of my instructors took years to recognize." Danny didn't know how to respond to praise from a SEAL commander. He'd expected anger, disappointment, legal consequences. Instead, Stevens was treating his unauthorized observations as legitimate analytical work. "Danny Martinez," Stevens continued, reading the name from the notebook's cover. 17 years old, senior at Southwest High School. Lives on Highland Avenue with his parents Miguel and Carmen Martinez. Father works construction, mother works at a medical clinic. Danny's eyes widened. Stevens had obviously conducted a thorough background investigation. "We've been aware of your presence here for weeks," Stevens explained. "Security cameras picked you up, base personnel reported seeing you, and I've been observing your behavior to determine your intentions and assess any security risks." Danny felt sick. "Am I in trouble, sir?" Stevens closed the notebook and studied Danny's face carefully. "That depends. Are you planning to continue sneaking onto this base?" "No, sir," Danny replied quickly. "I understand if I'm banned from." Son, Stevens interrupted, I didn't ask if you were banned. I asked if you were planning to continue sneaking in. Danny was confused by the distinction. I don't understand, sir. Stevens made a decision that would change both their lives. Danny, your dedication to learning about SEAL training is impressive. Your analytical skills are exceptional for someone your age. And your understanding of what makes successful candidates is better than most people who've studied this professionally. Danny waited, unsure where this conversation was heading, but sensing that something significant was about to happen. Rather than sneaking around like a criminal, how would you like to observe training officially? As a guest of the command, Danny's mouth fell open. Sir, are you serious? I'm completely serious. But there would be conditions. Stevens outlined his proposal carefully. Danny could observe training sessions as an official guest, but he would need his parents' permission, would have to maintain his academic performance at school, and would be required to contribute something valuable in return for the privilege of access. What kind of contribution? Danny asked. You'd work with our training analysts to document candidate behavior and training effectiveness. Your observations are already at a professional level. We'd like to formalize that capability and put it to productive use. Danny felt like he was dreaming. Commander, why would you do this for me? Stevens' expression grew more serious. Danny, I've been training SEALs for 3 years and serving as one for 22. In that time, I've learned to recognize potential when I see it. You have something special, dedication, analytical thinking, genuine passion for this work. Those qualities shouldn't be wasted. Getting his parents' permission proved more challenging than sneaking onto a military base. Miguel and Carmen Martinez were hard-working people who'd sacrificed everything to provide better opportunities for their children. But their idea of better opportunities didn't include military service, which they associated with danger, family separation, and uncertain economic futures. Danny, you should focus on your college applications, his mother said when he tried to explain Commander Stevens' offer. You have excellent grades. You could study engineering or medicine. Why do you want to waste time playing soldier? His father was more direct. Son, we didn't come to this country so you could join the military and get yourself killed in some foreign war. You have opportunities here that we never had. Don't throw them away on military fantasies. Danny tried to explain that observing SEAL training wasn't the same as enlisting, that this was an educational opportunity that could help him make informed decisions about his future. But his parents saw only risk and distraction from academic pursuits they considered more practical and secure. The breakthrough came when Commander Stevens offered to meet with Danny's parents personally. The idea of a military officer visiting their modest home in National City was intimidating for Miguel and Carmen, but Stevens' approach was respectful and understanding rather than intimidating or authoritative. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, Stevens said, sitting in their small living room. I understand your concerns about Danny's interest in military service. You want him to have opportunities for success and security that might not have been available to you in Mexico. Danny's parents nodded, appreciating that Stevens understood their perspective and respected their sacrifices. But Danny has demonstrated exceptional analytical abilities and genuine dedication to understanding complex systems. These are exactly the qualities that lead to success in any field: engineering, medicine, business, or military service. Stevens explained that his offer wasn't recruitment, but education. Danny will learn about leadership, teamwork, performance under pressure, and analytical thinking. These skills will serve him well regardless of his ultimate career choice. What convinced Danny's parents was Stevens' emphasis on Danny's current academic performance as a prerequisite for continued participation. If his grades suffered, the program would end immediately. If he showed any signs of being negatively influenced, they could withdraw him at any time. Commander, Carmen Martinez asked, you really think Danny has potential for this kind of work? Mrs. Martinez, in 6 weeks of unauthorized observation, your son identified patterns and insights about human performance that took my professional staff months to recognize. He has a natural ability to understand what makes people succeed or fail under pressure. That's a rare gift that should be developed properly. Miguel Martinez had been quiet during most of the conversation, but finally spoke up. Commander, if Danny does this, will it help him get into a good college? Sir, I can guarantee that letters of recommendation from Navy Special Operations officers will strengthen any college application. But more importantly, The analytical and leadership skills Danny develops will help him succeed wherever he goes. Danny's parents agreed to a trial period, 1 month of official observation, with the understanding that Danny's academic performance and behavior at home would be closely monitored for any negative changes. 3 days later, Danny walked through the main gate of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado for the first time as an authorized visitor, carrying proper identification and official authorization papers. The difference between sneaking onto the base and entering officially was profound, not just in terms of security, but in terms of how Danny saw himself and his future possibilities. Commander Stevens introduced Danny to the training staff as a civilian analyst, explaining his role in documenting candidate behavior and training effectiveness. The instructors were initially skeptical about having a teenager observe their operations, but Stevens' endorsement carried significant weight throughout the command. Chief Petty Officer Martinez, no relation to Danny, was assigned as Danny's primary supervisor. A veteran of multiple combat deployments with extensive experience in training development, Chief Martinez had initially opposed allowing a civilian to observe training operations. But he quickly recognized Danny's value as an objective observer with fresh analytical perspectives. "Kid's got eyes like a hawk," Martinez told Stevens after Danny's first week of official observation. "He spots things we miss because we're too close to the action." Yesterday, he identified a candidate who was about to quit 3 days before the guy actually rang the bell. Danny's analytical reports became valuable tools for the training staff. His outsider's perspective, combined with his detailed note-taking and natural pattern recognition abilities, provided insights that helped instructors better understand how to identify and develop potential SEALs. But the most significant change was in Danny himself. Having official access to SEAL training, being treated as a valued contributor rather than a trespasser, transformed his understanding of military service and his own capabilities. He began to see patterns not just in candidate behavior, but in leadership techniques, training methodologies, and organizational effectiveness. His reports evolved from simple observations to sophisticated analysis of human performance under stress. Danny's becoming a natural behavioral analyst, Stevens told his training staff during a weekly review. He's identifying factors that predict success or failure with accuracy that rivals our psychological screening processes. But Stevens also noticed something else developing in Danny, the confidence and bearing that came from being trusted with important responsibilities. The shy teenager who'd hidden behind equipment crates was becoming a poised young man who could brief senior officers on his findings without hesitation. 6 weeks into the official program, Stevens made another decision that surprised everyone, including himself. During Hell Week, the most grueling phase of SEAL training when candidates are pushed to their absolute physical and mental limits, Danny made an observation that caught everyone's attention and demonstrated the true value of his analytical abilities. "Commander," Danny said during a brief break in training operations, "I think candidate Morrison is about to quit, but not for the reasons you might expect." Stevens looked at the candidate Danny had identified. Petty Officer Morrison was one of the stronger performers in the class, showing no obvious signs of the breakdown or surrender that typically preceded voluntary withdrawal from training. "What makes you think that?" Stevens asked, genuinely curious about Danny's assessment. "He's not struggling with the physical challenges," Danny explained, consulting his detailed notes. "His times are consistently good. His form is solid. He's not showing signs of unusual fatigue or physical breakdown. But for the past 2 days, he's been increasingly isolated from the other candidates. He's completing tasks individually rather than as part of a team." Stevens reviewed his own observations and realized Danny was absolutely right. Morrison had been performing well individually, but had gradually disconnected from his classmates in ways that weren't immediately obvious to busy instructors. "In my notes from the first weeks of training," Danny continued, "Morrison was always helping other candidates, offering encouragement, sharing resources when allowed. That behavior has completely stopped. I think he's lost his sense of purpose in the training." Stevens was impressed by the sophistication of Danny's analysis. This wasn't just observation, it was behavioral prediction based on pattern recognition. "What do you recommend?" Danny hesitated. "Sir, I'm not qualified to make recommendations about SEAL training. Danny, you've been observing human behavior under stress for 4 months. You've identified patterns that experienced instructors missed. I'm asking for your professional opinion." The fact that Stevens was treating him as a professional analyst rather than a curious teenager gave Danny confidence to share his thoughts. "I think Morrison needs to be reminded why he's here," Danny said. "Not the physical challenges or the prestige of becoming a SEAL, but the mission of serving something bigger than himself. Maybe if he understood how his success impacts the other candidates, he'd reconnect with the team." Stevens made a decision that violated standard training protocols. Rather than waiting for Morrison to quit or pushing him harder individually, he assigned the candidate to a mentor role with struggling teammates, giving him responsibility for helping others succeed rather than just focusing on his own performance. The intervention worked perfectly. Morrison's sense of isolation disappeared when he was given responsibility for helping others succeed. His individual performance improved, and more importantly, his connection to the team was restored. He completed Hell Week successfully and eventually graduated from BUD/S training. "Danny," Stevens said after Morrison's successful completion of the evolution, "you just diagnosed and solved a leadership problem that could have resulted in losing a potentially excellent SEAL. That's not amateur observation. That's professional analysis at the highest level." The success with Morrison led to Danny being given significantly more responsibility in training analysis. His reports were shared with senior naval personnel, and his insights began influencing training methodologies at installations throughout the special operations community. But Stevens had an even bigger surprise in store for Danny. "Danny, I've been in contact with the Naval Academy about your analytical work here. They're very interested in meeting with you about their behavioral sciences program." Danny was stunned. "Sir, I'm not Navy material. I'm just a kid who likes watching SEAL training." "Danny, you're a 17-year-old who's contributing to special operations training at a professional level. You've identified patterns that help create better warriors and save lives. If that's not Navy material, I don't know what is." Stevens explained that the Naval Academy had specialized programs for students interested in military psychology, behavioral analysis, and leadership development. Danny's work at Coronado had caught their attention as an example of exceptional analytical potential in someone so young. "But there's something else," Stevens continued. "The Academy has early admission programs for exceptional candidates. Based on your work here and your academic record, they're prepared to offer you a slot in next year's incoming class." Danny felt like the world was spinning. 6 months ago, he'd been sneaking onto the base just to watch SEAL training from a distance. Now he was being offered admission to the Naval Academy based on analysis work that had started as teenage curiosity. "Commander, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it seriously. Talk to your parents. Consider what kind of future you want to build with the abilities you're discovering you have." Stevens pulled out a letter bearing the Naval Academy seal. "This is an official invitation to visit the Academy and meet with their admissions staff. They want to discuss your potential for their behavioral sciences program and your interest in naval service." Danny took the letter with trembling hands. "Sir, how did this happen? 6 months ago, I was just a kid who read too many books about SEALs." "Danny, 6 months ago you were a kid with exceptional potential who hadn't found the right outlet for his abilities. Now you're a young man who's proven he can contribute at a professional level to one of the most demanding training programs in the world." Stevens' expression grew more serious. "But I want you to understand something important. This opportunity isn't about me doing you a favor. It's about the Navy recognizing genuine talent and wanting to develop it properly. You've earned this through your work, your dedication, and your natural abilities." Danny looked around the training area where he'd spent months learning about human performance under stress, about leadership and teamwork, and the mental toughness that separated successful people from those who quit when things got difficult. "Commander, if I go to the Naval Academy, does that mean I can't become a SEAL?" Stevens smiled. "Danny, if you go to the Naval Academy and graduate, you'll be qualified to lead SEALs. You'll understand not just how to complete the training, but how to develop other people into the kind of warriors our country needs." Danny's parents' reaction to the Naval Academy invitation was complex and emotional. Pride in their son's achievements warred with concerns about military service and the dramatic changes this opportunity would bring to their family's carefully laid plans for his future. Miguel Martinez had always dreamed of his son becoming an engineer, following a stable career path that would provide security and prosperity. Carmen had hoped Danny would consider medicine, using his analytical abilities to help people while building a respected professional practice. Neither had imagined their son might become a naval officer. But when Commander Stevens explained that Naval Academy graduates were guaranteed excellent careers whether they remained in military service or transitioned to civilian leadership roles, Miguel and Carmen began to see this as exactly the kind of opportunity they'd hoped America would provide for their children. "This is what we came here for," Miguel told his wife after Stevens had left their home. "For Danny to have chances we never had. If the United States Navy thinks our son is special, maybe we should listen." Danny visited the Naval Academy in November, meeting with admissions staff and faculty from their behavioral sciences program. His work at Coronado had impressed not just the admissions committee, but professors who specialized in leadership development and human performance analysis. The academy offered Danny early admission with a full scholarship, contingent on his completion of high school, with continued academic excellence and demonstration of the analytical abilities he'd shown at SEAL training. Danny accepted the offer, understanding that his path from curious teenager to future naval officer had begun with simple determination to see what real SEAL training looked like. He continued working with Commander Stevens through his senior year of high school, refining his analytical skills and contributing to training improvements that would benefit future SEAL candidates. His reports became part of official training documentation, and his methods were adopted by other special operations training facilities. In June, Danny graduated from high school as valedictorian, his academic performance having improved rather than suffered from his demanding work at the naval base. His graduation speech focused on the importance of pursuing passions with dedication and intelligence, and how seemingly impossible opportunities could emerge from genuine commitment to learning. Commander Stevens attended Danny's high school graduation, representing the naval command that had recognized and developed Danny's potential. During the ceremony, he reflected on how a teenage trespasser had become one of the most valuable analysts his training program had ever utilized. Danny entered the Naval Academy that fall, beginning 4 years of intensive academic and military training that would prepare him for naval service and leadership responsibilities. His specialty in behavioral sciences was enriched by his practical experience analyzing human performance under stress. His classmates at the academy were impressed by Danny's real-world experience with special operations training. But what distinguished him wasn't just his knowledge. It was his understanding of how to identify and develop potential in other people. During his second year at the academy, Danny was selected for advanced leadership training based on his exceptional ability to analyze team dynamics and individual performance. His professors recognized that his insights weren't just academic. They were practical tools for developing better military leaders. After graduation from the Naval Academy, Danny was commissioned as a Navy officer and assigned to special operations support roles, where his analytical abilities could contribute to mission planning and personnel development. His long-term goal remained completing SEAL training himself, but now as an officer rather than an enlisted candidate. Commander Stevens continued to follow Danny's career, serving as an unofficial mentor and advocate. He used Danny's story as an example for other young people who showed interest in military service, demonstrating that dedication and analytical thinking could open doors that seemed impossible. Danny's transformation from teenage trespasser to Naval Academy graduate became a legend at Coronado, shared with new classes of SEAL candidates as an example of how determination and genuine interest could lead to extraordinary opportunities. But more importantly, Danny's story influenced how the Navy approached talent identification and development. His success demonstrated that valuable contributions could come from unexpected sources, and that recognizing potential early could benefit both individuals and the military as a whole. Years later, when Danny completed SEAL training as an officer and began leading his own teams, he remembered the lessons learned from months of watching and analyzing human performance. He understood not just how to succeed individually, but how to help others discover and develop their own potential for excellence. His approach to leadership was shaped by those early months of observation, when he'd learned that the most successful people weren't necessarily the strongest or fastest, but those who could help others succeed while maintaining focus on missions larger than themselves. Danny's story became part of SEAL folklore, not as an example of someone who cheated the system, but as proof that genuine passion and analytical intelligence could overcome conventional barriers to success. His journey from curious teenager to elite warrior and leader demonstrated that the most valuable insights often came from those who approached familiar challenges with fresh perspectives. Commander Stevens eventually retired from active duty, but continued to work with military leadership development programs. He frequently shared Danny's story as an example of how effective leaders recognize and develop potential wherever they find it, regardless of conventional expectations or traditional pathways. The equipment crates where Danny had first hidden to observe SEAL training remained in the same location, but they were eventually marked with a small plaque commemorating the importance of curiosity, dedication, and the willingness to recognize potential in unexpected places. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever had someone recognize potential in you that you didn't know existed? Someone who saw past your circumstances or age and offered you an opportunity that changed your life's direction. Tell us in the comments about the mentors and leaders who've believed in possibilities others couldn't see. And if you believe that potential should be recognized and developed regardless of conventional expectations, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that extraordinary opportunities can emerge from simple curiosity and dedication, and that the best leaders are those who help others discover what they're truly capable of achieving. We'll see you in the next one.